Did Trump deliberately hide critical military intel from Congress? Adam Schiff just went on MSNBC and dropped a bombshell, accusing the former president of keeping lawmakers in the dark about U.S. strikes on Iran. This could change everything. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. He hid what? The bombshell revelation: Trump hid it from Congress. This isn't just bad judgment, it's a dangerous abuse of power. Those are the chilling words of Congressman Adam Schiff, dropped during a high-impact MSNBC interview that's now taking social media by storm. With a calm, yet forceful tone, Schiff pointed the finger directly at former President Donald Trump, accusing him of something many would consider unthinkable: secretly launching military strikes against Iran without telling Congress. But what's really going on here? What did Trump supposedly do? And why is Schiff calling it one of the most serious national security concerns in recent memory? Let's walk through the storm that's now brewing in Washington and why it could have far-reaching consequences. The accusation: military moves in the shadows. During his interview on MSNBC's The Last Word, Schiff, who served as the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, claimed that Trump authorized a series of military operations against Iran or its proxy forces in the Middle East. The bombshell isn't that the operations happened. What's shocking, Schiff says, is that Congress was deliberately kept in the dark and not just vaguely uninformed, completely bypassed. Schiff stated clearly, this wasn't just a failure to communicate. This was a strategic choice to cut Congress out of the loop. If true, this would mean Trump violated long-standing legal obligations that require the executive branch to brief key congressional leaders, often called the Gang of Eight, on major military actions. These laws aren't optional. They're in place to ensure that no single person, even the president, can take the nation to war without accountability. Why Iran? Why now? To understand the gravity of this, we have to go back to the highly volatile relationship between the U.S. and Iran during Trump's presidency. In January 2020, Trump ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, a top Iranian general, in a drone strike that sent shockwaves across the globe. Iran responded with missile attacks on U.S. bases, and the world braced for full-scale war. But Schiff suggests that's not the full story. He claims more military operations followed, some aimed at Iranian-backed militias in Iraq and Syria, and that they were never properly disclosed to Congress. These weren't just defensive maneuvers, Schiff argues. They were strategic escalations with potential consequences that could have pulled the U.S. deeper into armed conflict, without debate, without a vote, without the people's representatives being consulted. What makes this so alarming? This isn't just about one or two airstrikes. Schiff is framing the situation as a violation of the constitutional balance of power. In the United States, Congress holds the authority to declare war, and while the president can act quickly in an emergency, they must still report those actions to lawmakers within 48 hours under the War Powers Resolution of 1973. By allegedly skipping this process, Trump didn't just keep secrets. He may have ignored federal law, undermined democratic oversight, and risked American lives in the process. And Schiff didn't mince words. This kind of secrecy isn't just unacceptable, it's downright dangerous. If we let this slide, the next president might not stop at strikes. What if it's full-blown war next time? The bigger picture, a dangerous precedent. Schiff's interview wasn't just about Trump. It was also a warning about presidential power getting out of control. If the president can carry out military operations in secret, without informing Congress, without public debate, then what's to stop any future leader from abusing that authority? Schiff made it clear that this isn't just about party politics. It's about preserving the democratic guardrails that have held the country together for centuries. He called on Congress to review Trump-era military decisions and to strengthen laws that ensure transparency in matters of war and peace. He's also pushing for more declassification of records so that the American people can see what was done in their name and without their knowledge. Where this leaves USAS. The interview ended. The MSNBC host was visibly stunned. Social media lit up within minutes. Clips of Schiff's statements spread across platforms, sparking fresh debate about executive power, national security, and democratic oversight. And just like that, the story of Trump and Iran, one that many thought was closed, is back on the front page. So, why is Schiff speaking out now? Because, he says, history won't wait. And if leaders like Trump aren't held accountable, future presidents might feel even more emboldened to act in the shadows, putting democracy and lives at risk. And that's a risk Schiff says America simply can't afford. What were these Iran strikes all about? To understand the full weight of Adam Schiff's explosive claims, we need to rewind to one of the most tense and dangerous periods in recent American foreign policy history, the escalating conflict between the United States and Iran during Donald Trump's presidency. It all reached a boiling point in January 2020 when the Trump administration ordered a drone strike that killed Qasem Soleimani, a top Iranian general and one of the most powerful military figures in the Middle East. That strike, carried out at Baghdad International Airport, sent shockwaves around the world. Soleimani wasn't just any general. He was the head of Iran's Quds force, responsible for foreign military operations and heavily involved in arming and supporting proxy groups across the region, from Iraq to Syria to Lebanon. To many in the U.S. government, he was a terrorist. To Iran and its allies, he was a national hero. After his death, Iran retaliated with missile strikes on American bases in Iraq, injuring dozens of U.S. soldiers. The world braced for what felt like the start of a war. And while the situation eventually de-escalated, we're now learning that the Soleimani strike may have only been the beginning, not the end, of a series of secretive military operations authorized by Trump. Schiff's claim. There was much more going on behind the scenes. In his recent MSNBC appearance, Congressman Adam Schiff dropped a major revelation. The Trump administration didn't stop with the Soleimani strike. According to Schiff, multiple follow-up operations were carried out, targeting Iranian forces or groups backed by Iran in Iraq, Syria, and possibly beyond, but without proper notification to Congress. These weren't just routine, defensive measures either. Schiff said these strikes were offensive in nature, highly calculated, and carried significant risks, not only to enemy forces but also to American troops, diplomats, and interests in the region. What makes this so disturbing, Schiff argues, is how these operations were handled internally. He says Congress was either left completely out of the loop or given vague, misleading briefings that downplayed the scale and consequences of the actions being taken. He told MSNBC, "We weren't just kept in the dark. We were deliberately misled." In other words, this wasn't an accident. It wasn't a communication breakdown. According to Schiff, it was a strategic choice by the Trump White House to bypass the legislative branch, operate in secrecy, and use military force without proper oversight or accountability. Legal requirements were ignored under the War Powers Resolution of 1973. The president must notify Congress within 48 hours of committing U.S. forces to hostilities or situations where hostilities are imminent. This law exists to prevent exactly the kind of unchecked military action Schiff is now accusing Trump of taking. Even when operations are classified, a select group of senior lawmakers, known as the Gang of Eight, must still be briefed on critical national security issues. These include the Speaker of the House, Senate Majority Leader, and top-ranking Intelligence Committee members from both parties. Schiff, who was one of those members at the time, says that those briefings either didn't happen at all or were misleading and incomplete. That's a serious allegation. It suggests that Trump may have intentionally violated federal law and, in doing so, risked triggering a broader regional war without Congress ever getting a chance to weigh in. The risks were very real. Let's not forget, the Middle East is a highly volatile and interconnected region. Any U.S. strike, especially on Iranian targets or their allies, can trigger a domino effect of retaliation, potentially drawing American forces into wider conflict. Schiff pointed out that these shadow operations endangered U.S. soldiers, contractors, and diplomats stationed across the region. Even embassies could have become targets, as we've seen in the past with attacks in Baghdad and Benghazi. And yet, according to Schiff, no warning was given, no votes were held, and no real oversight was allowed. The American people have a right to know when their military is being used in their name. And Congress has a duty to be involved in those decisions, he emphasized. Why this matters now? Why is Schiff raising this issue in 2025, years after Trump left office? Because, he says, the truth is only now coming to light through internal investigations, whistleblower reports, and classified documents that may soon be declassified. He believes that unless these actions are fully exposed, future presidents could follow the same dangerous path, assuming they can wage war from the shadows without being held accountable. More than just a partisan attack, Schiff frames his concerns as a defense of the Constitution and democratic checks and balances. He warned that without strong safeguards, it's only a matter of time before another crisis erupts. And next time, we might not be so lucky to avoid all-out war. As Schiff's allegations open a dark and disturbing chapter in U.S. foreign policy. 1. Where life or death decisions may have been made in secret, beyond the reach of the law, and with no accountability to the people. And if that's true, then we're not just talking about military strikes, that we're talking about a serious threat to democracy itself. Why it matters. Oversight versus power. Let's be absolutely clear. In the U.S. system of government, the power to declare war belongs to Congress, not the president. That's not a suggestion, tradition, or optional courtesy. It's a fundamental check written into the Constitution, meant to prevent one person from unilaterally taking the country into conflict. Yes, the president, as commander-in-chief, can act swiftly in cases of emergency, when American lives are at immediate risk, or when rapid military response is essential. But even then, there are strict limits. The president must notify Congress within 48 hours of any military engagement under the War Powers Resolution of 1973, and Congress must be involved in approving extended military action beyond 60 days. So, when Congressman Adam Schiff goes on national television and accuses Donald Trump of secretly authorizing military strikes on Iran without properly informing Congress, it's not just a political attack. It's a warning that the very balance of power in our democracy may have been violated. Unchecked power in the executive branch. Schiff's concern isn't just about a handful of strikes. It's about unchecked power if a president can carry out covert military actions without oversight, without briefing lawmakers, and without even the minimal reporting required by law. That creates a dangerous precedent for future administrations. It essentially means the president could act as judge, jury, and executioner in matters of war, without the input or approval of the people's elected representatives. Schiff said it plainly on MSNBC. This isn't just about Trump. It's about the future of our democracy. If we let this slide, the next president might do even worse. Imagine a scenario in the future where a president, emboldened by this precedent, launches a full-scale military campaign, or even triggers a war, without telling Congress. That's not far-fetched. That's the path Schiff warns we're heading down if there's no accountability. The role of congressional oversight. Why does congressional oversight matter so much? Because war isn't just a military decision. It's a political, ethical, and deeply human decision. It affects soldiers, families, economies, and lives. That's why the founders made sure that only Congress could authorize war, forcing presidents to explain themselves, answer tough questions, and justify the use of deadly force to the nation's lawmakers. Congressional oversight ensures transparency, checks on power, and public accountability. It prevents hasty decisions. It keeps the military from becoming a personal tool of any one leader. And it ensures that war, if it must come, is truly a collective national decision. When that process is bypassed, as Schiff claims happened under Trump, it not only breaks the law, it breaks trust. It leaves the American people in the dark about decisions made in their name. What Schiff wants now in response to these revelations, Schiff is calling for action, not just words. First, he wants a full-scale investigation into what military actions Trump authorized and whether those actions were properly documented and disclosed. That includes a review of classified operations, internal memos, intelligence briefings, and communications between the White House and the Pentagon. Second, Schiff is pushing for tighter legal safeguards. He wants Congress to revisit and strengthen the War Powers Resolution, adding clearer penalties for violations and more robust requirements for disclosure, even for classified missions. This could mean requiring real-time notifications to key congressional leaders and limiting the president's ability to act unilaterally in gray areas. Finally, he wants greater transparency for the public. While some operations must remain secret for national security reasons, Schiff argues that too much is hidden behind the label of classified. He believes that after-the-fact transparency is essential for holding leaders accountable and preserving trust in democratic institutions. Why this moment is so critical. This moment matters not just because of what happened in the past, but because of what could happen in the future if Trump's actions go unchallenged. Schiff warns, it sends a clear message to future presidents. You can get away with launching military strikes in secret. You can cut Congress out, and you won't face consequences. That's not just dangerous. It's destabilizing. That it risks turning the presidency into something it was never meant to be, a military monarchy, where one person alone decides who lives, who dies, and when a nation goes to war. It also sets a double standard. If the average person broke the law, they'd be held accountable. But if a president breaks the law in the name of national security, the system often looks the other way. Schiff says that must end now. Because if we don't restore and reinforce these constitutional guardrails, the next crisis may be even worse, and the consequences irreversible. Schiff isn't just questioning one decision. He's raising the alarm about a much bigger threat, the slow erosion of democratic checks and balances. And if Congress doesn't act, the cost could be far greater than a few unreported airstrikes. Could be the loss of public control over war itself. Reactions, backlash, support, and political fireworks the moment Congressman Adam Schiff accused former President Donald Trump of concealing military actions from Congress. It was like a political earthquake in Washington. The aftershocks are still being felt. Schiff's fiery interview on MSNBC wasn't just another partisan jab. It lit a fire under both parties, the media and the American public. And the reactions? Predictably fierce, deeply divided, and already spilling over into the 2025 political landscape. Democrats rallied behind Schiff within hours of the interview airing. Top Democrats began issuing statements of support. Some praised Schiff for his courageous truth-telling, while others called for immediate action. Senator Elizabeth Warren tweeted, "If Trump launched unauthorized strikes and hid them from Congress, that's a flagrant abuse of power. We need answers. We need accountability." Senator Chris Murphy called for a full intelligence review, while House Leader Hakeem Jeffries demanded access to classified military briefings from the Trump administration. According to reports, at least a dozen lawmakers are working to introduce new legislation that would tighten limits on presidential war powers, including stricter timelines for congressional notification and heavier penalties for violations. Some Democrats are even pushing to declassify portions of the military activity Schiff referenced, arguing that the American public has the right to know if major military decisions were made behind closed doors without democratic oversight. Republicans push back hard, but not everyone is applauding Schiff. Republicans immediately slammed his comments as reckless, misleading, and politically motivated. Senator Lindsey Graham dismissed the interview as a publicity stunt, accusing Schiff of trying to rewrite history to stir up outrage and stay relevant. President Trump protected American interests in the Middle East. Period. There's no scandal here, just another Schiff show, Graham told Fox News. House Republican leader Steve Scalise went further, calling for an ethics investigation into Schiff, claiming he may have discussed classified intelligence on live TV. While Schiff didn't reveal specific targets or military details, GOP leaders insist he towed a dangerous line. That right-wing commentators echoed that narrative, painting Schiff as a partisan actor exploiting national security for attention. Tucker Carlson, now running an independent news platform, called the whole story deep state drama and mocked it as Schiff's latest conspiracy theory. The public responds, and it's divided despite the political sniping. Millions of Americans have tuned into the controversy. Within 24 hours of airing, clips of Schiff's MSNBC interview had been shared across YouTube, TikTok, and Twitter/X, racking up tens of millions of views. Hashtags like hashtag #TrumpIranCoverUp, hashtag #SchiffSpeaksOut, and hashtag presidential secrecy began trending. The comments ranged from outrage to skepticism. If this is true, Trump should be prosecuted. How did we not know about this until now? Is Schiff telling the truth, or is this just another distraction? A growing number of Americans are demanding clarity, documents, and evidence. Several polls are already underway asking voters how much they trust either Trump or Schiff on matters of national security. Early results show a country split down the middle, with independents expressing the most concern about unchecked executive power, regardless of political affiliation. The intelligence community remains silent. For now, one of the most intriguing parts of this unfolding story is the radio silence from the intelligence community and the Pentagon. So far, no official from the CIA, NSA, or Defense Department has publicly confirmed or denied Schiff's claims. This has only fueled more speculation. Are they being cautious with classified information, or are they preparing for a coordinated response? Insiders say classified documents related to Iran operations during Trump's presidency do exist, but accessing and declassifying them would require action from current administration officials or Congress itself. Meanwhile, former Trump defense officials like Mark Esper and John Bolton have also stayed quiet, though media outlets report that both have been contacted for comment. Why this moment feels so explosive part of the reason Schiff's appearance is hitting such a nerve is that it taps into broader anxieties, fears about war powers, government secrecy, and the erosion of constitutional checks and balances. In recent years, many Americans have grown wary of how much power presidents wield, particularly when it comes to national security. From drone strikes and surveillance programs to covert military missions, the executive branch often acts with minimal public knowledge or input. Schiff's accusation that Trump took this to a dangerous new level has ignited a debate that reaches far beyond party lines, as one MSNBC anchor put it. This isn't just about Trump. This is about whether we, as a country, are okay with presidents launching attacks in our name, in secret, without oversight. Where it goes from here, the firestorm is far from over. Congressional hearings are already being discussed. Activists are calling for whistleblowers to come forward. Legal experts are debating whether Trump's alleged actions could lead to charges, even years after the fact. And Schiff? He says he's not backing down. I'm going to keep speaking out. Because silence is how abuses of power become normalized. No matter where you stand politically, one thing is clear. This story isn't going away, and it may just be the beginning of a much bigger reckoning over how America decides to go to war. What happens next? A fight for truth. So, where does this explosive story go from here? The battle lines are already being drawn. Congressman Adam Schiff isn't backing down. In fact, he's doubling down, calling for immediate declassification of documents tied to Iran-related military operations carried out during Donald Trump's presidency. The American people deserve to know what was done in their name. Without their knowledge, Schiff declared, he's not just pushing for transparency. He's also reigniting a critical national debate. Should any president have the power to launch military action without oversight and without consequences? A push for new war powers limits at the heart of Schiff's next steps is one key goal: fixing the system that allowed this to happen, if it did. That's why he's urging Congress to strengthen the War Powers Resolution. The 1973 law meant to limit presidential authority over military engagement. Schiff wants new amendments that would force real-time briefings to congressional leadership for any military action taken abroad, limit the use of classified cover to delay or avoid oversight, establish legal consequences for any president who fails to follow these rules. We can't rely on norms anymore, Schiff warned. We need laws with teeth. And he's not alone. A growing number of Democrats, and even some moderate Republicans, are signaling support for reforms, especially in a post-Trump era where executive power has become more concentrated than ever. The 2024 election: power, secrecy, and trust. Make no mistake, this story will have ripple effects in the 2024 election and beyond. If Donald Trump continues his campaign for the presidency, this issue may become a central theme. Schiff and other critics will likely frame Trump as a leader who abused power, skirted oversight, and risked war without public knowledge. It feeds into a broader narrative that Trump, when unchecked, could make unilateral decisions with global consequences, free from democratic restraints. But Trump's base? They see it differently. For many of his supporters, this is just more political theater, another attack by the so-called deep state. They argue that Trump was doing what was necessary to keep America safe, and that discussing classified operations in public is irresponsible and dangerous. Expect campaign ads. Expect debate questions. Expect this issue to be weaponized by both sides. Could there be a bigger cover-up? Perhaps the most chilling part of Schiff's message is what he didn't say outright, but strongly implied. we may only be scratching the surface. If Trump truly kept Iran strikes secret from Congress, what else was hidden? Were there other countries involved? Were there casualties? Did these operations nearly trigger retaliation? Did any allies push back behind the scenes? Some sources close to Capitol Hill are quietly suggesting that Schiff's comments were just the beginning, and that a broader investigation may uncover even more troubling actions that occurred under the radar during Trump's final year in office. Schiff is urging whistleblowers to come forward, confidentially if necessary. Legal teams are reportedly reviewing documents, transcripts, and military logs. In short, this could turn into one of the biggest national security stories since the Pentagon Papers. The stakes: democracy versus secrecy. Schiff closed his MSNBC appearance with a message that struck a nerve. If we allow this kind of secrecy to go unchecked, we risk losing the very foundation of our democracy: accountability. And he's right about one thing. This isn't just about partisan politics. It's about trust in government, about whether we live in a system where no one is above the law, not even the president. Right now, America faces a crucial choice: demand answers and enforce limits, or risk repeating the same mistakes. Your voice matters, so here we are. A former president accused of hiding military actions, a sitting congressman demanding answers, a public caught in the middle, asking, who do we believe? And who do we hold accountable? We want to hear from you. Do you think Trump was protecting the country or crossing the line? Should presidents have the power to act without oversight? Or should Congress have the final say when it comes to war? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let your voice be heard. And if you found this story important, smash that like button, share it with someone who needs to know, and subscribe for more deep, engaging stories that cut through the noise and dive into the truth. Because this conversation isn't over. It's just getting started.